Hi, my name is Jeanette Yates. I'm the founder of the Self Caregiver, and here with me today is Adam Zuckerman. He
Hi.
is the founder of Buried in Work, but you have so many other things about you that I want to make sure our people know. And then we're going to talk about Buried in Work today. This is so important, this conversation we're going to have, because what you're doing over at Buried in Work is helping all of us caregivers, families, people figure out all of the chaos that is estate planning, what to do with it, where, what is it, what to do with it, how to do it, what not to do, all those things. And it's all on the website. So the answer to all of the questions today, Adam, will be go to the website, but we will dive into that in more detail later. But just to let people know more about you, Adam, you are an entrepreneur, an attorney, you have been a part of lots of startups, technological innovations. You help in so many areas. You've done led global initiatives. You've worked for nonprofits. I love part of your resume talks about building bicycles to help improve connection and communication and education in different countries. You also are an adjunct professor, uh, all these kind of things. But the thing that I think makes you such a powerful person to head up the work of Buried in Work is because of your expertise as an attorney. You were part of your family's care team for your father. And so that is kind of your origin story of starting Buried in Work. So I want us to dive into that today. I want you to tell me a little bit about that whole caregiving, family care hat that you wore first. And of course, if there's anything else from your from your bio that you want to share with us, please do. I couldn't wrap my head around all of it. It's a lot. He's been a very busy person, y'all, is what I'm trying to say. But I want to hear how this idea of Buried in Work got started. And I know it started with your family.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I need to hire you to do PR because that's a phenomenal introduction that likely oversells me just a bit. You're right. I'm an attorney. I have an MBA. I've worked in big companies like Anheuser-Busch and Discovery. I was actually Discovery Channel's parent company's entrepreneur, which meant anything from invest in startups to we have a show where someone's jumping off the top of Mount Everest. How do we make it better? To go fix file sharing. I was in finance at a hedge fund that grew to $1.2 billion while I was there, which is pretty interesting. I was on the ops side. But most importantly, and most recently, I founded a company called Buried in Work, which we're here to talk about today, that helps simplify estate planning and end-of-life tasks because it is a challenge that far too many people in this country have to deal with. And you're right, it was a very personal experience for me that led to this venture. And one that if you asked me 10 years ago what I'd be doing, this would be very far from the response. Now, prior to my father passing away 6.5 years earlier, he was diagnosed with leukemia for the first time. I actually donated bone marrow to him. He was in the hospital for quite some time. Hopkins was absolutely phenomenal, Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And the transplant took. We got some extra time with him. It came back. There was a relapse. They were able to put him into remission again. And during that time period, he was able to, in a limited fashion in some ways, he couldn't travel as much as he wanted to, build relationships with my niece and nephew, his grandkids, which is great on my sister's side. They were very young when he was first diagnosed. And that ebb and flow of, hey, I'm feeling great today. I'm not feeling so great today. Oh, no, I have to go back to the hospital. What's going to happen? Was challenging, not just for him, but for the family, for my mom especially, and everybody else that loved him. And towards the end, it was kind of surprising how everything happened. I remember I went out to get some breakfast with my mom, my dad, and my wife. And my dad mentioned kind of quietly, he's like, hey, I'm just not feeling great. I think I should go back to the doctor. And he looked a little bit yellow. It was strange. And he was over at my house the next day. We're doing some woodworking in the basement. He walks up the stairs and he goes, Adam, I'm actually tired. I should go to the doctor. And when we say we're tired, we take a nap. When he says he's tired, it's a blood disease, blood cancer. He goes to the doctor. And they run some tests. They have him check into Hopkins on Thursday. And 12 days later, he passes away. So it was unbelievably quick. And he was with it up until the day before he passed away, having conversations, tired, napping, whatnot, and palliative care. Moved to hospice care as well, very quickly through that progression. And it was a learning experience for a lot of people, especially me. Based on my background, I was named executor in the will. My mom is still around, and I wanted to take really diligent notes to make sure that everything that we were doing to transition the estate was up to par. And if I made any mistakes, I wanted to know where I made them so I could learn from them. And when I showed my mom's financial planner what I had put together, at the end of the conversation, she said it was the most comprehensive transition she's ever seen in her life, and I had to give it away. Now,
Wow.
growing up, I'm in my mid-40s now. I like to watch cartoons. And there's always a little like devil on your shoulder, versus angel. And the devil's going, she's lying to you. It's not that good. She just doesn't want you to move your mom's money. But the angel on my shoulder on the other side was going, hey, it's actually pretty organized. Maybe you should do that. You know how to code. You know how to make a website. So I showed a few people, my friends, people that were my mom's age, and every single person said, Adam, you really should just redact your mom's information, type up some notes, share what you learned. Because literally my process was, this is what I did today at this time. It took this long. This is why I did it. Here's who I spoke to. Here's the outcome, and here are next steps. And here's why I did it for everything, like over 300 tasks. And I threw up a website, and I thought that would be it. It would be just a very basic blog, on Squarespace, and I'd be done with it. So I posted to 3 sites: LinkedIn, Facebook, and Nextdoor. And to my very great surprise, possibly even astonishment, we had over 10,000 visits to the webpage in a week. And from there, it has taken off. I mean, before we hit record today, we have nearly 500,000 impressions, non-paid organic, every single month now. And that's increasing month over month, double digits. We're going to have more than 10, 15 million impressions if this track record continues, if not more, over the next year. And the content that we're creating is helping people. And it's all born out of a process that we went through caring for my dad and helping my mom with her estate. And, it's been a journey.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And, I know that, on the other side of things, we can look back and say, oh, I went through this terrible thing. And then it created, I was able to create something beautiful. But I know it must have been very hard for you and your family. And so I am thankful that you're here, but I do, send you a lot of comfort, because I know it's still something that you end up talking about a lot. So I know that is, it brings up things, So
Yeah.
I appreciate you doing that and being so open and sharing that. And you talk about, you throw this on Squarespace. Thank goodness for Squarespace, right? Like, they're just like, come start.
We're not there anymore. The website actually got so big that we had to move over. We're on WordPress now. So,
but you just start like, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to throw it out there and see what happens. And then overnight you see, oh, I'm not the only person that is going through this. And what I really loved when I went to your website the first time was that it was not boring, first of all, because I think it's the whole thing is overwhelming. We're going to talk a little bit and break it down so it's not so overwhelming. The whole concept of planning for what happens now, what happens when your assets start to be in question by the government and like all this kind of stuff, and then like what happens after you pass away. That is all. These are huge chunks of information, and it can be very overwhelming and boring, which is why sometimes people give up, including myself at times. Like, I don't even want to have to think about this, and we just walk away. But on your website, you have all of these different buckets of information. And for me, it took me a long time to kind of figure this out. But like, when we talk about these there's estate planning, end of life planning, funeral plan, there's like, what is happening? What is your care plan now while you're still alive and able to make decisions? What is going on with your health and your money and your assets? Then there's what happens as you begin to need more care, as your care needs change, and perhaps your ability to make decisions changes. What is the plan for that? And then there's what happens after, like, what do you want to happen to yourself and your possessions, your your assets after you're gone. And so there's these three different buckets, and within each one of those buckets are, you know, paperwork after paperwork after paperwork, document after document after document. And for some, you need doctors, for some, you need attorneys, for some, you need financial people. It's all very confusing. But when you go to the Buried in Work website, one of the things I like about it is you've assembled this team as well to help you curate and create resources that help families figure out what they need right now and then what they can work on for later. And that to me is a big deal. You know, I think that's another hard thing for people who are just now starting to realize, you know, we talked about this, I think, before I hit record. It's like you go to the hospital, you know, you probably aren't even thinking this on the day-to-day of your caregiving life, right? You're taking your parent to the doctor, you're taking them, you know, maybe they have to go to the hospital. You talked about, you know, your dad going in and out of the hospital. That's the way my mom is. We're going in and out. And then and then, you know, my mom's talked, she's communicating, she's doing her thing. But then there comes a time where they're not able to do that. And then the doctors come to you and they say, do you have any advanced directives? Do you have medical surrogate? Blah, blah, blah. And they start throwing all these things. And you're like, my loved one's back there. I don't know what's happening. I don't know all their medicines. I don't know, you know, like, and you lose it. And then that's when you're like, okay, now I've got to get this figured out. And then you're overwhelmed when you know, go online and try to figure it out, which is why I hope that your website continues to get higher and higher and higher in the search, so that that's the first place everybody goes to, because it eliminates a lot of that. So I want to talk a little bit about that aspect of your website. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, one of the things I'm going to quote it right here. The vision of Buried in Work is to be the premier authority in simplifying estate planning and transitions and creating a future where these processes are stress-free and accessible to all. And I really love that vision, but I want you to talk a little bit more about why it's so important, or why you have structured, you and your team have structured Buried in Work to be this easy on-ramp for us overwhelmed and freaked out caregivers.
Yeah, so it's the scavenger hunt, and that scavenger hunt is horrible. Some scavenger hunts in life are fun, you know, an Easter egg hunt maybe on Easter, but the last thing you want to do when times are tough is learn from scratch and try and find information that if you took a little bit of time to locate and organize earlier, it would have been just significantly easier. And the analogy that I often draw for a lot of people is making dinner with a friend. So if I invite you over, Jeanette, to make dinner tonight, and you walk in the door and we've got our ingredients on the counter, we've got the recipe, the oven's preheated, you know, bottle of wine's chilling. It's going to be a nice, you know, fun night as our friends come over later. We're just there a little bit early to cook. It's going to go really easily. You know, we're going to have a good time. We're going to make a great meal, and everything's going to be easy. But if I invite you over to make dinner and the door's locked, I'm not home, you need to break down the door, you need to find the ingredients. You don't know that I keep the ingredients in a shoebox in my closet for some reason. And people are coming over, and if you don't have it done, there's actually ramifications because one of your friends is diabetic and actually needs to eat at a certain time. That's problematic. And that's what's happening today in America over and over and over and over again. And I give stats if we want to talk about it, about how many people are turning 65 every day, things of that nature. But the problem is that this is a scenario that a lot of people find themselves in that they could have prepared for, that they just quite frankly haven't. Mm-hmm. And it's not because they don't want to. It's oftentimes because they didn't know that they should, or they didn't even know where to start. Right. Now, it's sort of like shopping for tires or shopping for a mattress, where you may see advertisements for them, but you just gloss over them until you actually need tires or you need, you know, a mattress. And then you're like, oh, here are all my options. Don't let yourself get to the point where you need this content, where you have to start figuring things out, because it's just going to take a lot longer and it's going to be a lot more painful. Now, when somebody passes away or somebody gets sick or incapacitated, because that's a big problem when it comes to estate planning, and I'll explain that in a second what I mean by that, the last thing you want to do is search for information and try and figure things out when you can actually be supporting and caring and spending time and being present with that individual. What I mean by comprehensive estate planning, most people think that having an estate plan means transitioning your assets after you pass away. And that's certainly like the definition of an estate plan, of what it's for. But it goes so much farther beyond having a will or having a trust. It's everything in your life needs to be organized. So in the event you're incapacitated, in the event something happens to you, in the event that your family needs to go through palliative care, hospice care, end of life, transitions, your funeral if you want, your final resting place, and then transitioning your assets.
Mm-hmm.
All of that has to be in order. And that includes what happens to your pets and your plants and your minors and your non-minor dependents and your hidden valuables. And do you have benefits, or you're in the military? There's so many different things that come into play. And that's what Buried in Work is trying to do.
Yeah.
So if it's shutting down accounts like Amazon or Netflix, whether it's reaching out to banks to say someone passed away, you're going to have questions that have been asked and answered millions of times, because surprisingly, everybody dies and there's millions of people in the United States. So this has happened literally millions of times. But there's an industry out there that oftentimes makes it challenging to get money from people, but also just to keep their industry insulated.
Right.
And what Buried in Work is doing is providing an unbelievable amount of free resources if you want to do it yourself.
Right.
And for individuals that need a little bit of help or want a little bit of help, we've got a bunch of products and services that we can offer, or our partners can offer you also, to make things a little bit easier.
That's another thing I found I thought was really helpful too, is like, because a lot of people are like, oh, I called a real estate attorney and everything's, or I called an elder care attorney and it's going to be so expensive and I still don't even know, do I even need all of this? And, like they're trying to sell me this package, but I think I only need the one or two things now, And so, it's really helpful to be able to see like, oh, there are some things I do need to get some professional people in on. And then these are some other things I can do myself. Now you have already, we're on the same wavelength. I love this because I wrote some notes down before. I was like, I got to make sure I ask.
Oh no, you came prepared.
And you mentioned all of them. For example, you did talk about estate planning. And of course you mentioned like what it is technically versus what are the things that you need to think about. And of course, the first thing that, that comes to mind, for many, and, I'm talking from a caregiver perspective, like making sure that my parent has this. Now, fortunately for me, my mom did do, we did do this about 10 years ago. But I will tell you that the only reason that happened is because somebody came to me and said, I want to help you and your mom do this. Yep. I was not thinking about this. So I had that. And so that's what we're doing now to you who are watching this. We're coming to you and saying, we want to help you do this. But the idea of estate planning, sometimes people think, well, I don't got nothing, so I don't need to do this. And so I kind of want you, and I think you've kind of already done this, but is there anything else you want to say? Like, who needs to do estate planning versus who doesn't?
It's pretty simple. If you are over the age of 18 and you can vote, you actually have an estate plan. You might not have a will, you might not have a trust, you might not have a list of the key contacts that need to be contacted in the event something happens to you, or your medical records in one place. So in the event you need treatment really quickly, they can access it. The people can access it.
You probably have a bank account, some social profiles, and an Amazon account, and you need to figure out what you're going to do, what's going to happen.
But even if you don't, let's boil this down to the simplest level. You don't have a bank account, you don't have a car, you don't rent. You may have some stuff, a shirt on your back. You may have a dog that you love. If you die without a will, you still have an estate plan, and that process is called intestate. So it follows the laws and regulations of the state that you live in, and the state is going to dictate what happens to your belongings. But more importantly, what happens to you and who gets to make decisions on your behalf in the event that you're incapacitated before you pass away. So if you don't like people making decisions for you about your physical body while you're alive, do you want to be intubated? Do you not want to be intubated? Do you want to donate organs? Do you not want to donate organs? All of these different types of questions need to be answered. But if you don't do that, then the state's going to do it for you.
Right. So you're saying if you're over 18,
Hmm.
You have an estate plan. It's either your plan or the
Or
state's.
the states. That's it. And it is a lot easier when you don't have a large estate to go through the process and get all your information organized. And what we say is you create your comprehensive estate plan today for tomorrow, and then that estate plan evolves with you over time.
Right.
Because where you are today is going to be very, very different than where you are in 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And update it. So we say updated on April 16th, the day after you pay taxes, you think, and we've got a checklist in our Clear Kit, actually, the annual checklist that says update this, 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 and this. Like, have you had any major life events? Have you had kids? Have your kids become adults? Have you bought a car? Have you got new bank accounts? Have you closed credit cards? Have you decided I don't want to be buried here? I'd rather be cremated. And then you go, wait a minute, I actually don't like cremation anymore because there's a high carbon footprint. Maybe I want a natural green burial, or I want to be turned into a tree or shot into space or turned into coral reefs. Right? There's so many different options out
I
there.
was going to say, all of those are real things, people.
Yeah, real things. Come to the website. We've got lists.
Yeah. So that's the first thing is like, if you are over 18, you have, there's an estate plan. It's either yours or the state's. Then you have mentioned, so a couple of things that I get asked first. I'm going to ask these questions really quick, and then I'm going to go back to some of the things that you said. But
yeah,
so like I mentioned, you go into the hospital. It's an emergency. It's the middle of the night, and they want to know if you have an advance directive. What even is that?
okay.
And again, I just want to say, and again, the answers to all these questions are on buriedinwork.com. But
advanced directives, they mean different things in different places. So certain states say that an advance directive is a specific legal document that outlines your preferences for medical care in case you become unable to communicate those decisions on your own, right? In other states, it's kind of a catch-all term. Advance directives are a bunch of different documents that could mean that, and you get to figure out what it means. But effectively, what they're doing is it's saying that in the event something happens to you and you can't speak on your own behalf, you're in a coma, you're under medication, something else, you've identified who gets to make those medical decisions on your behalf. That's it.
Right.
And it goes a little bit deeper than that. You can have when not to do not resuscitate. It can be, here's my living will, here's my healthcare surrogate designation. It really depends where you are. But effectively, it's if something happens to me, I want these individuals or this person to understand what to do. And the doctor needs to know about it and have access to it, because a lot of people create these documents and they're in a closet, but they don't tell their family members where they are. And then after they pass away, the family member finds it and they go, oh no, we actually did the opposite of what they wanted because they had no idea that the document even existed.
Right. And so one thing, it's different in different places, but the idea is advanced directives usually under that umbrella is going to be, is there medical surrogate, which is if you're unable to make a decision, who makes it for you? And then there's also the different powers of attorney. There's like medical power of attorney, durable power of attorney, and some other power of, like, how does that relate to advanced directives, medical surrogate?
Yeah, they all go together. So power of attorney is a document that lets somebody advocate for you on your behalf, and that's just one of the types of documents that can go into that broader overall umbrella. So a medical power of attorney or healthcare proxy, that means that somebody can make medical decisions for you. A financial power of attorney, and they can be the same person, that means that they can make financial decisions for you. Now, granted, you do have to understand, and this is a very common misunderstanding, is that power of attorneys, they end immediately when the grantor passes away or when they're revoked. You can revoke a power of attorney, and they also end when the person dies. So if I
have financial power of attorney, but over, of my mother, if I'm my mother's financial power of attorney and I have access to do things while she's alive, but maybe incapacitated, when she passes away, I lose the ability to make any financial, unless there's other things in place, which is why we were talking about the estate plan.
Yep. You either have to be the estate administrator, the executor, or nominated by the local jurisdiction to oversee the estate. So that is something that most people don't realize. There's time and time again where you'll call up and go, oh, I was on this account yesterday. Well, you're not anymore, sir. I'm very sorry, but your loved one has passed away. Now, to go take one step back, though, to create advanced directives, there's 3 different ways that you can do it. You can do it on your own, and there are requirements that have to be followed state by state by state by state. Again, come to the website. We've got a list of what those are and which states are unique. You can use a specialized service. We actually recommend one specifically right now called Midio. They are awesome. Come to the website, learn about it. It's video-based advanced directives, because advanced directives are oftentimes written down, not accessible, and they're confusing to understand what the person really wanted. So they provide video and also paper. Or you can do it with a lawyer. Most people, though, don't go to a lawyer or their healthcare provider to get advanced directives on their own. It's oftentimes part of a larger package. But what's neat is that you can use specialized services like Midio, like MyAD Vault, and others that will complement and supplement what you've done on your own or with a lawyer. And then you just want to let your lawyer know, hey, I've done this, so everybody knows what the current versions are.
Okay, so that was very helpful, because I think sometimes we get like all those terms are kind of connected, but sometimes we get confused. Like, I have to have an advanced directive and this and this and this. And it's like, no, advanced directive is part of this big piece of this puzzle. So I wanted you to just kind of talk through some of those. Another thing that that I wanted to address is the idea of this is one more question. I get this in my DMs a lot from people that are my age, that are, I've been caring for my mom for 40 years, but a lot of my friends who are turning 50 as I am, they're starting to care for their parents, and they say, they've been asking me about all these things, so I'm kind of looking into this or that. But do I have to have a power of attorney if I'm the only next of kin? Do I have to have a financial power of attorney if I am on, like, do I have to be the power of attorney if I'm on their checking account with them?
Yeah, let me explain it this way. Simplification is the best course of action.
Right.
You don't want the doctor to go, prove to me you're the only next of kin that's able to make this decision.
Gotcha.
You want to be able to say, here's the finalized document that says I am that person. Talk to me. And then they go, oh, yeah, great. We can talk to you now. You're right. If you are the next of kin, you don't have a joint bank account, or you don't have a payable on death beneficiary, that money in that bank account will eventually come to you after you go through probate. Or you can have a contractual relationship with that bank where as soon as you provide that death certificate, it automatically processes because it's contractual.
So that's another simplification piece. It's not just about like simplifying it for me while I'm reading it on the website. It's like simplifying it while you're in the moment, so that things don't take several hours or several days or several months, depending on which thing, right? It's, are you the next of kin? No, but here's my documentation that says I'm the one that's making these decisions.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of things that go to this level of complexity that people just aren't familiar with. So there's the famous quote, I think it was Donald Rumsfeld that said it. I could be wrong. That's the known knowns, the known unknowns, and the unknown unknowns. Unless you've gone through this process before, and he was speaking about a completely different topic, not estate planning, but it applies. Unless you've gone through this process before, there's a lot that you're just going to miss. Here's an example. You're married. You have a credit card. Your husband has a credit card. You actually have 3 credit cards, let's say. You have a traditional, in quotes, division of labor, and your husband's the one who took out all the credit cards, and you're secondary on all of those accounts. Could be vice versa. It doesn't matter. If your husband were to pass away, as soon as that credit card company is notified, and there's several ways they learn about it. You can notify them through the credit unions directly. They can find out other ways. You would lose all of your credit cards as well as a secondary card owner, because you don't have the account. You're secondary. So there's tips and tricks that you should do to make sure that you always have access to credit. Like, you should have 1 credit card in your name as a minimum. You don't have to use it a lot. But the last thing you want to have happen is your husband gets hit by a bus or doesn't wake up, or your spouse gets hit by a bus or doesn't wake up, and then you have no way to actually pay for anything. It's the unknown unknowns that unless somebody tells you that, you're probably not going to know how that works. Same thing with the order payable on death. It processes before your will does.
Right.
And there's so many instances like that of, oh, I made a will. Well, is your will valid? How many people signed it? Were those witnesses of age? Were they related to you? Did you need a notary? Were they of sound mind? Is it holographic? Do you need a codicil later? Like, there's so many different things that, while you can figure out this information on your own, and we want to do as as good a job as we can to give you that information so you can make that decision. We actually recommend that you go that route if you want, but then get it checked by somebody.
Right.
And what's interesting is some attorneys will go, you did it on your own. I don't even want to talk to you because I don't want the liability of your mistake. So you can go down that path, but we want to help you figure out what that path is best for you. And we actually have quizzes on the website, and to create a will, answer these questions, and we're going to say, oh, you've got a really simple estate. You can probably try and figure out yourself. And if not, we walk you through those options.
I have a story too. And
Yes.
it made me, you made me think about this when you were talking about this next of kin. So my stepfather, he was no longer married to my mom, but he had been my stepfather for like 30 years. And so, he was still my stepdad. He got sick last year and then was put under hospice care in December and passed away. But when he got sick, he was in a traumatic accident, caused some brain injury and things like that. And it was traumatic for him, for all of us. And I am his stepdaughter, but he never adopted me. And so, then his next of kin was my 98-year-old grandmother, who is of sound mind, but also like not about to try to figure all of this out in this day. Like she stays at home, like she doesn't go, And so the process of getting one of my uncles who were the next of kin after my grandmother, so it still would not have been me. So like they had to step in. It was complicated and it took a while. Now, fortunately, my stepdad was still able to communicate for a period of time. So luckily we got everything done for him before the brain injury kind of did what it did. But that was something that like it had never even occurred to me. And I've, of course, have already done all of this paperwork with my mother. And I still was like, oh, wait, that's right. I'm not the next of kin. So I think sometimes we like, like you said, we feel like, oh, well, I'm on their bank account, or, oh, I'm their wife, or, oh, I'm their daughter, like we don't really think about it. And there's these laws and rules and standards that, are great for medical professionals and lawyers and all these people to have so that we can have a system as complicated as it may be, but it does sometimes, there's, cogs, there's things that clog up everything, and that makes it much more traumatic. So I love that you're like you said, that not only is the website simple for us coming in to look at it, but it also is more about the simplicity of what you're having to go through in the moment, which I really like. Okay.
What's neat there is that on average, it takes over 500 hours. Some people say this has 570 hours to administer an estate. And that's just after somebody passes away.
Right.
And a large part of that goes back to that scavenger hunt that we talked about earlier. And that's why we created the product called the Clear Kit, which is no matter where you are in your lifespan, if you're 18 years or older, if you're 50, if you're 40, if you're 75, this has all the information in one place. So your family has literally everything in binders that they can travel with, store some information at the house, some information that can travel with you, can go with you to the hospital. And it outlines everything in the process, and then it ties back to all the content that's on the site. So we've got like 1,800 plus articles now, 100 plus checklists and guides and different things. We've got card games, a whole host of other stuff. And that
was the thing I was going to lead into next, because you mentioned we can have all this stuff. Like I can get my Clear Kit, I can fill it out. My husband and I can have all our things in place. Cause that's another thing I wanted to tell caregivers that are listening today. We're talking about your parents, but we're also talking about you.
Yeah.
Like, so, like I'm not only making sure, like my mom has all this, but also do my husband and I have all this. And now I'm going to tell my kids who are both over 18, hey, you're getting this for Christmas. But, I could have my Clear Kit, I can have all of my documents, but if my kids don't know about that, that is going to do them zero good. So that brings me to the conversations we have to have, which you have an answer for that. Again, it's on the website, but I want to talk about the card games.
Okay. So I love, they're probably my favorite thing on the whole website.
They're pretty awesome.
My dad has a really funny sense of humor, or had rather. It's weird. Sometimes I talk about him like he's here. Maybe he is.
Yeah.
And we were in the hospital a few days before he came home, and we realized things weren't necessarily going the best way, and he was having a really good day. And we just started asking questions. Dad, tell us one more story about when you were a kid. Tell us one more story about your favorite food. Tell us one more story about grandpa. Tell us one more story about your legacy, blah, 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 blah. Like all these really random things that like when somebody passes away, you just lose those stories. And realized that looking back on the time in the hospital, that was some of the best time that we actually had. It wasn't going through and just watching football together, which was nice. There's a Redskins game on, or Commanders game. We live in Maryland. But rather like actually connecting and getting those last bits. So we created a card game. We collaborated with a game designer in Ukraine, which is kind of neat, and then a game designer in the United States. We're going to print it in the US. They are like, for those on video, here's nothing left unsaid. This one helps you figure out the more important parts of your estate. So do you have a will? Do you have a trust? Where is it? How do you feel about palliative care? Your definitions of some terms that you should probably know about. One More Story is the other game that is 6 categories, 126 cards of those types of questions. Tell us one more story about. And what's neat about it is that like we spent a lot of time working on these. So the questions were developed with clinical social workers, 2 of them. We also had a bunch of other people weigh in on them. The game designers helped us choose card stock. So this is a 300 GSM weight, which means that it's a hefty card that has a linen feel on it. So it's good and tactile or has a good tactile experience for people that have dexterity issues. So people can hold the cards really easily, really big font as well. And it's just something that's really accessible. We even turned it into a game called Death During Dinner. So you can host dinner parties and have people come over and start going through some of these questions, either get to know your friends or talk about end of life, because all of this stuff has to be fun and accessible. And we want to do what we can to make it easier.
I think that I ended up buying the bundle, Death During Dinner. Death During Dinner.
Yep.
Because you get both of the card games when you do that. And so, stories are something that I know in my family have been extremely meaningful. My mom tells the story of riding around in her dad's pickup truck while he told stories. So, and then she tells that story, but then she also tells the stories that he told her, and it's so, and that's one of the things that she's been, in this time where we're kind of starting to get to where things are starting to not work. Right. We're getting down to that phase in her health journey. And she's like, oh, I need to tell you this story. Oh, I have one more story to tell you. And so they're so important. And like my mom's a storyteller. So she's, but even people who aren't storytellers, maybe there's stories that they haven't told for various reasons. There's a lot of people who have stories that maybe they haven't wanted to tell, but as they start thinking about, well, I don't want to tell this story, but I also think it's an important story. So that's why I want to make sure my loved ones know about it. I think those are all very important things. And then of course, I love the idea. I love the idea of like having I'm just imagining like the supper clubs that like my generation like, well, we're the same generation.
Yeah, we're
but like, it's like supper club time and like, and by the way, we're playing this new game.
But the crazy thing is, like, we're getting emails from people. I'm taking them on dates with me, which I think is awesome. For One More Story, don't take nothing left unsaid. It's a little bit weird. One More Story is good for that. We were written up as Best Father's Day gift guide. We've had hospice companies and nursing homes and hospitals. They're actually on sale now in Johns Hopkins Hospital's gift shop. These cards are resonating because they help you start conversations that if you just came out and asked somebody a question in your family, like, I'm just going to pull up a card in front of me. I have no idea which one this is. What movie or show can you watch repeatedly? Like, it makes sense. Like, I want to know. But if I just ask you that randomly, you're going to go, Adam, why are you asking me this question? But because a card told you to ask it, it makes it so much easier. And it's not about getting through every single card in the deck. It's about seeing where the conversation takes you.
Yes.
So you can focus on one person. We've used them where you go around the room and you get to choose the person that you're going to ask. You can record them. There's a whole host of different things that you can do. But
what's the answer to you for that question for you?
Oh gosh, for me, I mean, there's the easy My Cousin Vinny, Shawshank Redemption that is just always on TV and you always stop.
It's true.
You don't have a choice not to. But Yeah, that
I
list can go.
refused to leave someone's house the other day because my cousin Vinny was on, and it was almost to the scene that Marissa Tomei's scene, and I was like, I can't leave until I
You
see her
can't.
Law Pause Attraction.
It's amazing. Hey, you can't make those tire marks without pause attraction.
Yeah, obviously.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of it has to do with like what are you going to stop when you're when you're flipping? I'm going to stop on Shawshank. I'm going to stop on My Cousin Vinny always.
Yeah.
It's funny that you have those too. I am also like if I had to watch a movie,
Mhm.
or like if somebody was like your a movie that you can watch over and over. It's not like a great movie, but it's my favorite book, so I have to watch the original Great Gatsby when I see it.
Yep.
So
Yep. Yep.
it's a classic. It's got Redford, Farrow, Sam Waterston. I mean, Bruce Dern. Like, I don't know.
Mhm.
Anyway, so that's mine. And my kids know that. They do know that.
If it's on, leave mom alone. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That and at Christmas time, the White Christmas.
White Christmas. My wife likes to watch Elf every single year. Christmas Story, not so much.
Yeah, my kids are like, "Oh, she's watching White Christmas. Let's get out of here." It's
There's
old.
times. Yeah. There's times of the year you watch certain things, and maybe what we do is on April 16th, you update your estate plan, you get your clear kit, you go through that, and then you watch a funny movie every year.
Yes,
That's
yes,
your new thing.
that's a great livener. That's a great livener. Okay, so I had some more questions, but I feel like we've gotten to a place where we can say there are many more questions. There are many more resources that we did not talk about. One of the things that I noticed today that I had not noticed before on your website is, in addition to the stuff that we've talked about, there's also
Mhm.
like, oh crap, I need to find a nursing home, or oh, I need,
Yeah.
a funeral home, a nursing home, a
Mhm.
long-term care. I need palliative. I've just been dealing with palliative care versus hospice care. You wouldn't necessarily put that in the estate planning bucket,
But
but it is kind of,
yeah, so
more questions that are confusing that you have to know as a caregiver.
that's why the website isn't simplifying estate planning, it's simplifying estate planning and end of life tasks.
Yes. Yes.
So we have 20 directories that are coming live on a rolling basis now. Several of them are already live, from finding palliative care and hospice care to nursing homes to even podcasts in the space. We have the most comprehensive listing of all the podcasts.
Yeah. That
Cemeteries.
makes me sad that I shut mine down because like
Bring it back.
I'm
Bring
like,
it back.
but I do love that there's that, because like I love the idea of like, oh, I have a caregiving question. I have a question about caring for myself or my mom. I'm going to go to Buried and Work first,
Yep.
because 99.999% chance you're going to have it, and if not,
And,
there's probably like a coming soon button.
and
And
if you don't, let us know. So I'll
yeah,
give you an example. We got a phone call. It was actually an email from someone. They were sitting in the hospital. Their mom had hit their head, and they're in the emergency room. And the person next to them was talking to the person next to them. And emergency rooms are really cramped
yeah,
oftentimes. So he accidentally overheard their conversation. He said, "Adam, are there any?" It wasn't actually Adam. It was Dear Bird and Work. Does your website have any resources to help people shut down and contact companies after somebody passes away? Because it turns out that they were complaining that they needed to get into somebody's Amazon account and they couldn't. And we don't, but that's something that we could create. And literally within a week and a half, for nearly 100 companies in the United States, we had reached out and have directions now on what to do in the event somebody dies and has an
yeah.
account with them. And that's on the website. And we've done that with unclaimed property. We've done that with that. We have will requirements. If there's something that is related to this space that we don't have, let us know. And we're going to do our best to find somebody that can provide it. We're going to create that resource ourselves for you, because you shouldn't have to go and reinvent the wheel, and this information is available. It's just very difficult to find, and that's what we're here for. And there's a reason, like literally on our website now, seeing how people go through their journeys. We've got the Google Analytics on it and a bunch of other stuff. It is awesome to see where they're from, what they're looking at, and what we can do to help them.
Yeah.
Like, hold on, I'm going to load up analytics.
I was going to say, I love this is where the marketing hat of me gets excited too when you talk about. But it is really interesting because I bet you're seeing some patterns in the pathways that people take, which
Absolutely.
is, so there is a some trends that like when people get that first like oh crap moment where they're like, I need to start thinking about this. Where is that? Where are they coming in mostly?
Yeah, so it depends. We have a significant amount of our traffic as organic search, and
Right.
throughout the day, it's neat as you see the sun go across the country. You
Mm,
see people lighting up the website, as it goes. Then you can see at certain times of days that certain people are looking for certain things. So oftentimes the really, really late night
late
are
night.
looking at the checklist, what to do, what do you do after somebody dies? And you
Mm,
can tell that they're in a place of grief right now.
mm,
Um, we have a lot of people during the day that just come to the site to poke around, and then they end up getting our free estate summary worksheet. So
mhm.
if you have nothing else, download this worksheet. It's 3 pages long. It helps your family just have the really highest level of high information. And it's free because we want you to be organized. And then if you want to get a clear kit, that's absolutely awesome. That helps us pay for other content on the website. But it's it's really neat. And like in the time that we are right now with the elections, the red and the blue, the yada yadas in the
Mm,
states, the rural, suburban, or rural versus cities, it doesn't matter where you are. This is going to impact you. It doesn't matter what political spectrum you have. It's going to impact you, and it impacts you in the same exact way, just in a different place of the country. And
yeah,
it's kind of neat to show that no matter where we are, everybody is experiencing the same thing. This is a common theme that I
yeah,
think that we can actually bring people together from if we do it the right way.
yeah. Well, I think that is a tremendous statement, and I and I think we should end it there. But I do want to ask you first of all, I want to thank you for your time and clarifying all of this gobbledygook for us, not only in this interview today, but also on the website, buriedinwork.com. And, we didn't talk about this, but you have, we've been talking about individuals and families, but you also have things for professionals
Mhm.
and then also things for businesses as well. So resources for businesses. So you do have a wealth of information for pretty much any place that you might want to enter this conversation. But thank you so much for your time today, Adam. Is there anything else you want to tell anybody before we sign off today?
No, I love that point. If you're a business, if you have HR, if you work for an association, a church, a synagogue, we've got a lot of resources. We partner. People are using us for fundraisers. Like, reach out. I'd love to hear from you. And Jeanette, thank you so much for having the conversation with me. It was fun.
Thank you.